I'm just realizing how awkward this is going to be because I'm not used to recording a podcast while having a camera on. But if you like my podcast and also like my face, you can watch this podcast over on YouTube because I'm filming my podcast now. That's my introduction. Welcome. Welcome to season 2 of my podcast. We have had a name change. This podcast is now called Feelings You Can Trust with Dominique Davis. And I'm Dominique Davis. Welcome. We're going to just go ahead and jump right in. You guys may know, or you may not know. I don't know. I talk about it a lot. It's become my entire personality, but I am in grad school. So I'm going to get my master's in social work and then get my clinical hours. And then I will become a licensed therapist. I am on the road. I am on the journey. And I was thinking about my community on YouTube and how you guys have just truly and genuinely held me down over all of my phases and all of my growth. And I sat and I asked myself, what was the one constant that I would bring to YouTube that gave everyone value? And I believe that it is the understanding that you can love your life. And when I think about the type of therapist that I want to be, whether I'm working with someone who's just having a little bit of difficulty motivating themselves, or whether I'm working with someone who's in survival and going through the trenches, the message that I want to give that is consistent to both individuals is that you can love your life. So when it comes to this podcast and when it comes to YouTube, I want to create content that can help people understand how to create a life that they love. Because if you do not love your life right now, not only does your life have to change, but you have to change. Because in order for something different to happen, the person has to change. Therefore, understanding that everything that we experience is a result of our thoughts, because our thoughts then inspire our actions, and our actions create the life that we're experiencing. So when we understand that there is a process to curating a life that we love, then we can get out of the passenger seat of our experience and get back into the driver's seat. There's not going to be all new language on this podcast. A lot of the things that I say, if you've been subscribed to me, if you've been following me for a while, it's going to sound very familiar. But there will also be a lot of new language on this podcast because I'm going to school and I'm learning a lot of things. And the most beautiful thing about what I'm learning is that there are research studies that support the effort that it takes to curate a life that you love. When that effort's taken, we have physical proof that that effort manifests into a life that is more than worthy of love. So I think that a lot of times, especially depending on what we are going through, we can begin to settle in our life experiences. And when we settle in our life experiences, then that effort that I just mentioned, it's not prioritized. And that's when we're in the passenger seat. That's when life just starts to happen to us, right? And in this podcast, I want to inspire, and I also want to give information, and I want to give tools, because ultimately I can't change your life for you, but I can give you the information that may help you take action, and not just random action, but intentional and inspired action. So I have created a framework, 5 steps to a life that you love. We will revisit this framework throughout these videos, throughout these podcasts. They will be a constant, and each of these videos will fall under one of the steps within the framework. So the very first step of curating a life that you love will be to get out of survival. That is the first step. Nothing can be done outside of getting out of survival. So if you are not sure whether you are in survival, we'll get to that in a little bit. That's what we're going to talk about today. The second step is going to be decluttering and reorganizing your mind. After that, we have building the vision. Number 4 is going to be taking action. And number 5, we rinse and repeat, because often once we take action, we have officially done something that is outside of our comfort zone. And when we do something outside of our comfort zone, we often find ourselves back in survival. So we rinse and we repeat. Okay, so step 1, get out of survival. Well, how do I know if I'm in survival? What does it mean to be in survival? Well, that's a conversation about the nervous system. Being in survival, it's a feeling, but it's also a process that our body's going through. We know we're in survival if we consistently find ourselves in heightened emotional states, because the body and the brain are working together to protect the person from danger that ultimately isn't really there. But the mind has become convinced that there is something that it needs protection from. So being in survival is understanding that your body is consistently communicating to the brain that we need to defend ourselves. This can look different for everyone. We can get into a little bit of familiar language. If you have been on the internet in the past 5 years, you've probably heard fight, flight, or freeze. So those are the 3 most common trauma responses. Fight is when the body becomes aggressive and when the person may become aggressive, ready to defend themselves. This can be physically or this can be emotionally, as an argumentative. We have flight, which is when a person wants to run away from the lion. Again, this can be physically or it can be emotionally. Flight is often deciding to avoid conflict, avoid confrontation. And then we have freeze, which is immobilization. So this is the fetal position, or emotionally, this is when an individual may shut down, they may become nonverbal. These reactions are very interesting, and if you identify with any of those trauma responses, I highly encourage you to do some reading on them, because when you can understand how the body communicates that it feels like it's in danger, that awareness can help you understand, hey, my body's not happy right now. And then you can bring it to the prefrontal cortex and say, hey, am I in danger? Am I really in danger? We could bring it back to the logical mind and say, maybe, just maybe, I'm emotional right now. Yeah. But we can only do that when we recognize that the body is in fight, flight, or freeze. We can talk about how to get out of survival for hours, which is why I'll make multiple videos about it. That's why it's step 1 on the framework, because it's a conversation that we'll come back to over and over and over again. But ultimately, getting out of survival is a reprogramming process. It's reprogramming the mind. If the mind constantly believes that it is in danger, then it's the process of convincing the mind that it is safe. So today, I would like to discuss understanding that everything that we experience is a social construct. A lot of us in survival are in survival because we are not happy with our life circumstances. We're not happy with our career. We're not happy with our relationships. We're not happy with the amount of money that we have in the bank. And our perception of our life circumstances creates an illusion of being in danger or being afraid, because we simply don't feel like our lives are what our lives are supposed to be. So when we understand that everything that we believe about life is a social construct, we have the ability to understand what life has taught us, what our experiences have taught us, and what we want to believe, what we choose to believe. The process of socialization begins when we are born. When we are born, we have our parents and we have the people who take care of us. Because those people are our caretakers, we are depending on those people to show us what life means. These people don't only teach us to walk, they don't only teach us to talk, but they teach us what religion to be. They teach us how to treat our neighbor. They teach us how to interact with others and how to move through the world simply through observation. A little later in life, we start to enter institutions. We go to school. We interact with people outside of our home. And the institutions begin to teach us what life is. So first we start with gathering information in the home. Then we start to gather information from school and from the institutions that we interact with. For example, church, the institutions we start to interact with as children. And then we get a little older, perhaps we go to college, we get our first job. These experiences are all teaching us what life is ultimately supposed to be. And when we are learning, we're not necessarily learning what information will serve us most, what information will be most healthy for us. We're more so learning what is simply there, right? We're a sponge, and whatever moisture is available for us to absorb, we will absorb. There's no picking and choosing. So a lot of becoming a conscious adult, a lot of curating a life that you love is understanding that all of your current beliefs were socially constructed. So a lot of the a lot of the emotional pressure that we put on ourselves and our lives for it to look a certain way, we were pressured to do so. For example, let's talk about sexuality. If a person is taught that being straight is prioritized, being straight is spiritually correct, if you are not straight, you will not be loved, then that individual may feel as though, on the inside, I'm not attracted to the opposite gender. But the social construct around them has convinced them that they will not be safe if they choose to pursue a relationship with the opposite gender. So even though their internal state is telling them something different, their external state has constructed boundaries and barriers based on social rules to get that individual to fall in line with what society expects. Social constructs are often barriers that stop us from fully pursuing what we are meant to be pursuing in our lives. And this is not just whittled down to sexuality. A lot of times, especially for Black people, especially for people of color, we don't fully pursue the careers that we want. We don't fully pursue the relationships that we want. We don't fully pursue the lives that we want because we are told by our family and we're told by institutions that that's not what Black people do. It's all a social construct. And a lot of times being broke, being single and unhappy, a lot of times the stereotypical image of a Black person is what comes easier because we're primed to believe that as a Black person, that is what we should be. So even though an individual may say, I'm not happy, I don't have any money in my savings account, I can't live like this, and that person is in survival, there's a part of them that feels safety in knowing that, don't all Black people live like this? Don't most Black people live like this? When we understand, that's another video. We have to talk about how race is also a social construct. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, but before we get to that, when that person understands that there are no barriers, there are no limitations on you as an individual. You can be whoever you want to be, rich or poor, single or in a relationship. You can be whoever you want to be. I don't know why money and relationships are the only examples my brain's thinking about right now. I need to write down some examples before I film so that I can give you guys more a broader range of examples. But anyway, you can be whoever you want to be. That is the point. And when we recognize that social constructs convince us to stay in situations that don't ultimately fulfill us because those social constructs feel more safe to the nervous system, then we can start that retraining process. We can start the process of allowing ourselves to relearn what it is to expect from life. Or we can relearn what we want to expect from life, what we should expect from life. Because there are no limitations. The only limitations that we experience are the limitations that society creates. But in order to surpass those limitations, we have to recognize that often those very limitations create a barrier and a boundary that feels visceral to the body, which is why the rewiring process is so important. You'll listen to this video and you'll say, yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. I get that. But then after you're done watching this video, more than likely, you'll go back to doing exactly what you were doing yesterday, exactly what you were doing the day before. What rewiring implies is that we are rewiring, doing something different consistently, learning to think differently and doing different things. So when we understand that everything is a social construct, then it's about consistently learning to see everything from that perspective. Okay? Whenever we interact with people, if we have an interaction that may have a little bit of conflict in it, understanding that we can back away and look at the conflict from a place of, what is the social construct within this? What do I believe? What does that person believe? And now that I'm conscious of the conversation, what do I want to believe? What do I choose to believe? Because a lot of times you might agree more with the other person than you do with yourself. When we start to look at the world from a place of understanding that everything is a social construct and nothing's really real. Nothing's real. Even money is a social construct. Money used to be a piece of paper that we have applied value to, but now money is literally a number and commas on the screen that we have applied value to. Money is what gives us the ability to buy houses and buy cars and move throughout the world. So even though money itself doesn't mean anything, the social value of money means quite a bit. When we understand that there is a way to navigate within this world with the awareness of what social constructs are, that's when we start to get our freedom back. That's when we have the ability to move throughout the world and decide who we want to be with an awareness of what the majority of people think and believe. That way, we're not being drained of our own energy, being drained of our own life force, trying to keep up with these ideals and ideas that don't ultimately nurture the mind, the body, or the spirit. Getting out of survival starts when we unpack what social constructs are, when we unpack what social constructs we are living by. For example, if an individual is experiencing, let's say an individual is experiencing housing insecurity, that person is unhoused, and that individual is either in a shelter, or let's say more statistically relevant, that individual is couch surfing. So not in a shelter, but still does not have their own place of residence. The state of survival comes in because that person has been taught from a very, very, very young age, I need to have a house by this age. I need to own a house by this age. I need to own a house, have some stocks, have some realty, have this, and that by this age. So the idea that they're couch surfing, knowing that they're couch surfing, directly conflicts with the social constructs that they are raised by. And that uncomfortability of being out of alignment encourages the mind and the body to feel as if it's in danger because the expectation is not being met. But then you have an individual who has come to visit our country from another country, and they want to visit as many states as they can. So they couch surf so that they can see as many states as they can. And let's say that this person went ahead and gave up everything that they own in their home country, but they just want to travel. They want to travel and they want to see the world. Now, chances are, or they want to see America. So chances are the latter person has some money in their bank account to be able to do this comfortably. But physically, the two scenarios are the same. Both people have no residence. Both people have no place to say is their home. Both people are couch surfing, but both people have different expectations of their situations. Both people have different ideas of the level of life that they are at. So when we are able to look at our situation and say, I'm not happy with this, I want different for myself, but at the same time, turn down the knob on the level of fear and emotion that we are getting from our situation, that's when we're ultimately able to get out of survival. It's not necessarily the situation that we're in that puts us in survival, but our perspective of the situation that we're in. And I do want to clarify that if an individual is unhoused, but they are in danger, then that is survival in the most mammalistic sense. And that is in all ways valid. And there is nothing that will make that unvalid. If any person is in physical danger, that is a state of survival that positive thinking and motivation cannot get them out of. And a lot of times to get out of survival, we do need help. Okay? But that being said, when we are able to look at everything from a place of understanding what a social construct is, going back to our example about the person who is unhoused, understanding that our society is imperfect, especially Western society. And a lot of us are victims of imperfect circumstances. But that does not necessarily mean that we have to take on the role of a victim. Okay? So what do I mean by imperfect circumstances? I mean that you could work 2 jobs and still be unhoused. That's what I mean. That's an imperfect society. And a lot of us live in an imperfect society. But just because we experience something that's a reflection of a flawed society does not mean that we are trapped in that scenario. We are not. But in order to get out of that scenario, we have to be able to look at everything from a place of social constructs so that we can turn down the knob on emotion and free up space in our mind. Because when we are in survival, the mind is working on getting out of survival. And a lot of times when the mind is working on getting out of survival, those thoughts are quick fixes. Those thoughts are, I need to be safe now. But a lot of times, constructing a life that you love is about looking at the big picture. Survival is not big picture. Survival is, I need to be safe right now. Okay, so that same person who is couch surfing, they may say, let's say that they are couch surfing with a friend who says, hey, look, you could stay here for 6 months. Now, after 6 months, you got to find a place, but you could stay here for 6 months. That individual then has an opportunity to get out of survival. Now, a lot of times, I've been here myself. A lot of times, even though there is a couch to sleep on, because of the ego and because of the situation, not being happy with the situation I'm in, survival still is very active within the nervous system. I'm consistently, the person, I'm not talking about me, not going to make this about me, but the person is consistently attempting to get out of survival, even though their friend has said, hey, you can stay here. So what that looks like is, okay, I got to make some money. And then maybe they do some things that they should not do to make money in order to feel like they can get a place more quickly, in order to feel like they can get to where they want to be more quickly. So that would be looking at the situation from a place of survival. But if that individual were to say, okay, my life where I am right now is a reflection of an imperfect society. I see where I made mistakes, but I also see where I did everything I could. So I'm going to decide to not blame myself. I'm going to decide to reject the shame. And instead, I'm going to think about what I want. What type of life do I want? I know I do want my own place to stay. I know I do want a job. I don't necessarily want a car. I don't necessarily want to stay in this state with my friend. So then we start to look at big picture. Then that individual starts to see past survival to what they truly want. And when you can see what you truly want past survival, that is when you can start to create the vision. And that is when you can start to take action in the direction of what you truly want, not what survival is teaching you to do. And it is from that place that we start to get a little bit of momentum and we start to see things happen. But the very first step is getting out of survival. Everything's a social construct. Is there any way that you can use that information today and apply it to your life and use that information to release yourself from anything that may be holding you down, holding you back, making you feel shame, encouraging you, or not encouraging you, but discouraging you from fully going after what you want? Does understanding that life is a social construct in any way help you reach your dreams? It's important to remember that your circumstances do not define you. Getting out of survival is a practice of observing your reality and observing your reality objectively, and recognizing what is happening without personal opinion. So if you are couch surfing, recognizing, hey, I'm couch surfing, not, hey, I'm couch surfing because I'm so lazy and because I can't keep a job and no matter what, I keep losing jobs, so I shouldn't even work. All that. Learning how to be kind to yourself and observing your reality without all the rah-rah that comes with it. Because when we can observe our reality, we can create a game plan, but we can separate ourselves again from those circumstances because you are not defined by your circumstances. Life is a accumulation of hills and valleys, okay? Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. That's just life. But if we are so attached to the up, then when we fall, we really fall emotionally, right? So we are not attached to our circumstances. Our circumstances might be a reflection of the way that we think, right? But they're not a definition of who we are because we are all just humans, all worthy of basic human essential things like water, food, and shelter. We are all humans. And you being in whatever situation you may be in does not define the fact that you are a human worthy of a beautiful life. You are a human worthy of a beautiful life. And, we'll talk about that when it comes to decluttering the mind and, clearing the mind up to make sure that your mental health aligns with the life that you ultimately see yourself living. But the last thing I will say is when we are getting out of survival, what I find to be the easiest way to release expectation after we recognize that everything is a social construct is to mourn what we thought our lives would be. So to take time to process that, hey, I thought that I would have a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house by now. I thought that my business would be making $60 million a year by now. And instead, I'm couch surfing and I'm staying with my grandma next week. That's disappointing. You're allowed to be disappointed. Not for too long, but you're allowed to be disappointed. And the thing is, when you recognize it and when you allow yourself to fully process that you're not where you thought you were, and you allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, the rah-rah will come up. But when you listen to it and really hear what your mind is saying, then you have the ability to recognize whether you are allowing yourself to really implement this social construct theory. When you are processing with the understanding that everything's a social construct, you have the opportunity to process and be disappointed. But at no point should it be a reflection of how you are unworthy or how you deserve any of the things that happen in your life. Because we are all worthy of beautiful lives that we deserve to live, or we all deserve beautiful lives. But, some mindset stuff has to happen. That's all. So allow yourself to mourn. Allow yourself to mourn what you thought life would be. Don't stay there too long, but it's a part of the process. That's a part of the process. Okay. That is Feelings You Can Trust, Season 2, Episode 1. Yeah. We'll just call it Episode 1. Yeah, Episode 1. I hope that you enjoyed it, because I enjoyed recording it and I enjoyed talking to you. There were a couple of tech things that were happening while I was recording, so give me grace, and I'll try to figure it out by next time. But I hope that I gave you something to chew on, to think about, and I hope that, this podcast made your day better, not worse. If it made it worse, unsubscribe and never watch my videos again. I'm sorry. Thank you for being here. I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye.